Hashimoto's is a disease that many people are confused about, and this includes both doctors and patients. As a result, there are a whole lot of patients out there running around with low thyroid symptoms because they have been given bad advice. The saddest part about this is that much of the advice that they have been given is just plain wrong. I've been helping thyroid patients for years, and these are some of the most common lies that I see that doctors tell patients with Hashimoto's. If you have Hashimoto's, don't fall for these lies. Lie number 1, your TSH is normal. TSH is the test that doctors use to both diagnose and manage hypothyroidism. They use this test to determine if your thyroid is low or high, and also to determine if you are taking treatment, if that treatment is sufficient for your body. The only problem? It's definitely not as accurate as most doctors like to pretend. Yes, the TSH is accurate for what it tests for, but it's not the best test for assessing thyroid function. In other words, a normal TSH doesn't mean that your thyroid is actually normal. It just means that your TSH is normal. But there's a difference between having a normal TSH and having normal thyroid function. Having normal thyroid function means that all of the symptoms that you have associated with this hypothyroid state are 100% resolved. This means you won't have symptoms like weight gain, or hair loss, or depression, or fatigue, or constipation, or so on. How many of you listening to this have been told that your thyroid or your TSH is normal only to continue to experience all the symptoms I just listed above? It's very common. Even though the TSH isn't the best test to assess thyroid function, it still has some value. Most thyroid patients feel best when their TSH is around 1. Getting your TSH to this range doesn't guarantee that you will feel better, but there's no way to say that your thyroid is normal if your TSH is higher than this value. Lie number 2, changing your diet won't help your thyroid. Doctors know a lot about pharmaceutical medications, but they don't know anywhere near as much about nutrition and diet. This stems from the fact that most of their post-residency information and education comes from pharmaceutical companies. And these pharmaceutical companies spend more time convincing doctors that patients need more medications, not less. But the truth is that diet has always been an important treatment for just about any disease that you can think of, including Hashimoto's thyroiditis. More and more research is showing that specific diets can and do exert a powerful influence on immune function. And when it comes to Hashimoto's, if you can target immune function, then you can treat the underlying cause of the disease. Take this study, for instance, which showed that patients with Hashimoto's who were using the AIP diet saw significant improvement in quality of life measurements. This is just one study, but trust me when I say that there are plenty of anecdotal stories of patients with Hashimoto's who have made changes to their diet and have successfully put their disease into remission as a result. I have personally seen it time and time again. So, will changing your diet cure your Hashimoto's? Probably not by itself, but changing your diet definitely won't hurt and only has the potential to help. So the advice to 100% ignore your diet or to suggest that it has no impact on your quality of life or your symptoms is completely false. Lie number 3, you'll have to take thyroid medication forever. This one frustrates me more than any other because there's this idea that once you start taking thyroid medication, you'll have to be on it for the rest of your life. And again, this is just plain wrong. Yes, it is true that Hashimoto's can be a progressive disease which ultimately destroys your thyroid gland. And if this happens, you will have to take thyroid medication forever. But just because it can happen doesn't guarantee that it always will happen. As I mentioned above, there are definitely people out there who have successfully put their Hashimoto's into remission, which means they won't have to be on thyroid medication forever. To back this up, we also have newer studies which show that there are a lot of thyroid patients that can get off of their thyroid medication. Right now, the estimated number is about 30%, which is not insignificant. The bottom line, starting thyroid medication doesn't doom you to take it forever. Lie number 4, the best and only treatment for hypothyroidism is levothyroxine. Another incredibly frustrating lie perpetuated by doctors is this idea that levothyroxine is the best and only treatment for hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism is the state of low thyroid function that is typically associated with the disease Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So most people with Hashimoto's will ultimately end up in the hypothyroid state, which is why they will ultimately end up taking levothyroxine. And doctors are obsessed with using levothyroxine, even though there are so many other thyroid medications available to you. The biggest problem with levothyroxine has to do with the thyroid hormone that it contains. Both levothyroxine and Synthroid contain an inactive thyroid hormone known as T4. while other medications like levothyroxine contain the most active thyroid hormone known as T3. And other thyroid medications like Armour Thyroid contain a combination of both T4 and T3. Most thyroid patients agree that they feel much better when they take a combination of thyroid hormones such as T4 and T3. This is not only backed up by anecdotal stories and patient preference, but also by some research studies as well. In my own experience, I can tell you that many patients feel a lot better simply making the switch from one medication to another or by adding a little bit of T3 to their levothyroxine. Line number 5, your thyroid is normal, so all the symptoms you are experiencing are in your head. Have you personally been told this lie before? If you have, leave a comment below. There's this idea that if you're taking levothyroxine and your TSH is normal, that this means your thyroid is normal and that any symptoms you might be experiencing as a result would not be related to your thyroid. This is incredibly frustrating for patients with Hashimoto's because so many of them continue to feel terrible and have symptoms of hypothyroidism despite having normal labs or a normal thyroid. But the reality is that their symptoms are related to their thyroid and that their labs are not normal. We have a very good understanding of what happens to the body when it is in the low thyroid state. This low thyroid state will cause symptoms like weight gain, hair loss, depression, constipation, muscle aches and pains, cold intolerance, and so on. If you have these symptoms and they are not resolved when you take thyroid medication, then one of two things must be true. The first is that you aren't taking enough thyroid medication, and this is probably the most common. The second is that the symptoms you currently have, even though they are similar to those of hypothyroidism, may overlap with another medical condition. This one is also common, though not as common as the first. Do not accept that the lingering symptoms you have that are directly associated and coincide with the hypothyroid state are only inside of your head. They are very likely to be caused by either your thyroid or another medical condition, both of which need to be addressed. If your doctor tries to convince you otherwise, then it's time to get a second opinion. While you may need a doctor to give you medication, there are plenty of things that you can do as a patient with Hashimoto's all on your own. And if you want to learn how to treat your Hashimoto's naturally, I'd recommend checking out this video next.